Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, May 11th, 2021 Facilities Committee meeting. We are virtual this evening. The initial item on the agenda is introductions and administrative remarks. Mr. Dolan.
Thank you, Sarah. I just want to share the screen and share a couple of pictures because I'm going to keep my administrative remarks and our introduction. Steve Barron's a familiar face here through the planning stages of our accessibility and wellness project. I would like to just give a quick update on that. We had some exciting news to share this week. So let me just, are we seeing the slide?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to just share that we have broken ground officially. And I'm sure anybody who's been up and around the high school in the last 3 weeks has seen some action taking place. Construction fencing has gone up along Raider Road. It's most noticeable to anybody traveling through campus. Erosion and sediment controls have been established so that we can start digging and landscaping. Tree protections have been put up again along Raider Road. You've probably been able to see from this view only really what's going on, but this nice overhead view that Breslin had provided us from last week shows a lot of the action. Some trees were removed again along Raider Road and in here. This is an area that will be replanted with many more trees in the next year or so. Turf, if we look in the center section here, has clearly been rolled up and removed, and we're getting ready to excavate here for stormwater management facilities. Concrete demolition has taken place, and some rough site work has started. The concrete bleachers over here at Enki have come out. So again, I don't think you can see much peering over the fence. Some of our board members and steering committee members were able to get down on the field right in this location in the D end of the Prevo field last Thursday, and that was for an official groundbreaking. And that was an exciting day, a day that it didn't rain, a day that we were able to get down there and actually see all the plans that have been in formation for several years now start to come to light. So I just wanted to share that. And again, that'll conclude my administrative remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. And thank you to you and the team and Mr. Behrens and Ms. Gangle, who's behind the scenes here. She and Mr. Petiti, everybody worked very hard to put together a very nice groundbreaking ceremony last week. We had to keep it small and severely masked because of COVID, but it was wonderful to see everybody in person. Next item on the agenda is public comment. I believe, Ms. Gangle, you said we have none?
No public comment this evening.
Great. Okay, so the third item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. I have identified a small discrepancy that Mr. Dolan's going to look into. Did anybody else have any concerns with the minutes from last meeting? Okay. So then the first item on the agenda of agenda items is Bill, this is for you to explain, but we actually have some change orders. One of the things, but these are all good change orders in that they are all reductions in our costs. So maybe Mr. Dolan or Mr. Behrens, if you're going to pass it over, whoever's going to explain to the facilities committee why we'd like approval on these, that would be helpful.
Good, and you're
they
right.
Do require facilities and board approval because of the size of the change orders.
That's correct. Even though they are in the negative direction, they still require the board approval. And Steve was kind enough to jump on here in case there were any questions about them. Specifically, the first two slides, we had asked in the very beginning that our architects and engineers work with our awarded contractors to do some value engineering. So that is a process that started about 6 weeks ago, and a few of those efforts have been fruitful to date. So the first two we want to talk about, one is a alternate manufacturer for the stainless steel railings. And I show on this slide here, stainless steel railings that would be several places throughout the project, but I'm going to point along the field house up here. There will be railings at the top of the field house, railings on the bridge that takes us over along the ramps, and then there is ornamental fencing up along Raider Road, but there are also along the ramps these railing systems. So these railing systems look similar to, well, they are these samples that we show below. There's pictures of an actual manufactured sample that Steve and his team is reviewing right now to make sure that they match up to the specifications in our plans. And as of now, Steve, they do. It's looking very promising. And if we approve the samples, then we can take this change order in the amount of $95,000. So that would be a good savings right out of the gate. Steve, am I missing anything?
No, Bill, that's a that's a good summary. It's just an issue related to where they're sourcing the material from, and they were able to suggest a more local fabrication shop that they work with regularly. And as a result of that, we're able to realize a very substantial credit related to what is essentially an easier procurement process, a more trustworthy procurement process for them.
And then I can, unless there are any questions, I can talk about the next one. I'll jump to the next one.
Okay, that's good.
Okay. So this one, again, this is part of, I will give information in a later agenda item regarding some of the brick retaining walls. But in relation to that, we were looking at ways to, again, value engineer, to find ways to, some board members had shown interest in maybe returning the brick at the retaining walls that we had taken out initially for a savings of, it was an ad alternate of about $400,000, and we did not recommend doing that when we awarded the bids. But there was some talk about, would there be any way to get that brick back into the project? So Steve and Julian started looking into some options. And one of the things they started doing is saying, well, if we were to take the brick away from the retaining walls here at the tennis courts. And Steve, if I am correct, I just want to make sure I am correct on this. We're talking about this section here. We're not talking about the entryway up here off of Loop.
That's correct. Yep, just that run of wall essentially parallel to the tennis courts and the ramp associated with it as well.
So we worked with our contractor to break out what those costs would be, and they established this as a value of, I want to make sure I have it right. What's it right there? $36,000. And our feeling is that we would like to recommend that we take advantage of that change as well. You know, we talked about it with some of our steering committee members, and we feel that it would be a good recommendation to do that. So we're going to make that recommendation for a savings again on the brick at the tennis court only.
It's consistent with the aesthetic approach that we've taken, where through the bid alternate, we were offered a credit to remove the brick from walls that did not essentially touch the building or the building additions in some way. So as you can see in this image here, the chevron wall that Bill indicated earlier, as well as the gate, those are elements that are essentially attached to the building and an extension of it in a massing way. Whereas those freestanding walls elsewhere on site would be the filled and rubbed concrete. And so we thought for consistency there, we could do the same thing with these tennis court walls. Turns out that it was, again, a fairly substantial credit that was being offered there. So that's the reason we're recommending it.
And just to clarify, we are not at this point recommending or asking the board to put brick back on the curved ramp walls, because even though we found these two offsetting change orders, I don't think, I know in conversations with Mrs. Monahan, we don't necessarily think that that's something that the committee could support. Knowing Ms. Solomon's aversion to spending any extra money on this, we thought she would also take the same approach. So I didn't I told Mr. Dolan not to put that on the agenda. I'll take the blame for that.
No, and that's correct. And I will report on that. I could jump ahead to 4.3, or we could wait till we get there. And it's just to say that, sorry, if I click down a few slides, maybe I'll do that since it's.
Yeah, let me just ask, does anybody have questions about these two change orders? So,
Yeah,
you do.
I had a question. So is that wall there in order to like prevent the tennis balls from being like knocked out of the zone?
This wall, that's a great question, Avery. That wall is basically, it helps us create an accessible ramp system back behind here. And it's also, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's about 5 or 6 feet high, so you could use it to practice against.
That's right, Avery. What's not immediately apparent in this image is there is an elevation difference there. So that's actually a retaining wall because the tennis courts are lower than that plaza by about 5 feet. And then the wall then goes a little bit above the elevation of that plaza, and then there's a railing on top of it. So the ramps that you see on the right-hand end of that wall go up behind it to the level of the plaza. So it's a wall that from the plaza will only look to be about 2 feet tall, but from the tennis court side will be more like 6 or 6.5.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Did anybody else on the committee have questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
One thing I'd like to request, similar to what we've talked about, a chart monitoring contingency spend, it would be nice to kind of have an itemization of all change orders. So there's like a one-stop form, so to speak, that we can see, all the, I suspect there will be more than just these two. So just from an organization standpoint, it would be very helpful to be able to capture this, if not in the same thing, if it does affect contingency budget, but just to have kind of a rolling document.
Well, and I had kind of assumed this money goes back into the contingency fund. So this would be, additions to the contingencies.
Correct.
Yeah. So I agree, Mrs. Amayan. We had talked about that, and I do think that's something we should work with Mr. Dolan on.
Yeah, and I think like if we can start it now, it'd be a lot easier to start it now than to bring it up to 2 weeks from now again and just kind of try and backtrack.
Now, you're right, it's a great suggestion. We are working on something. We haven't formalized what it will look like yet, but the idea would be to have a consistent reporting method that we could look at, just so that, because you're right, every month we'll report, I suspect, something in the way of a change order or an update that would affect the budget.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but like any change order comes in and out of that contingency budget, correct?
Correct.
So it can be one and the same. Whether, to Sarah's point, this savings of 36 and 95, they could be added to the budget. So it can just be like a rolling Excel spreadsheet showing, the changes to that item.
Yeah, that is absolutely the plan. There's two categories. There's the contingency, and then there's also allowances. As we've
Correct,
explained
right.
previously, allowances are already in the contractor's bids, and therefore in the contract amount. And so there'll be a rolling accounting of that, as well as any change orders and adjusting those against the project contingency. So that is our responsibility, even more precisely, Fidavia's responsibility with respect to the project accounting. And there will be a document that in that way that would be provided as a monthly update to you. And that's where anything that happened during that month would be brought. Some things in a reporting fashion, other things seeking approval. But all that will be presented on a monthly basis. Yep.
Okay, and I just like to make the recommendation that we can see that at the next steering committee meeting.
Well,
Oh, there's.
Hi,
I
James.
think it would
Hi,
actually be
James.
better to see it before then. I think it would be great
Right on
if
cue.
Monahan and I could get a draft of it by the end of the week. And if we need to work with Fidavia on that, that's fine. But I think we should,
That's a good idea.
I think it would be nice if we could give comments to that before the next board meeting.
Yeah.
Because I think
I'm-
with the change order at the board meeting, we should have this.
Okay.
And my intent is that it's already started, and I would hate to have us be scrambling for, a month from now saying like, we still haven't seen this document. So the sooner we
Yeah,
start
but-
it, probably the easier it is.
just to let you know, we've got a heavy, detailed change order log that we always do for projects, and it's meticulous with the amount of detail in it. So we have got no problems, but I don't think that would be a good document to present. It's got too much information in it, so we have got another document that we can present specifically for board meetings, and it's just giving you a nice, beautiful little summary of everything with photographs, etc., and a summary of where we are with the project. So no problem.
Okay, great, thanks. That was my only comment.
Sarah, I have a really totally different. This is Nancy. That was a fantastic suggestion. I mean, that was right on point. My question is ridiculous compared to that, but I'm looking at this picture. Doesn't the tennis court have to have a huge fence around the whole thing that it doesn't seem is on there?
It does, Lydia. It's kind of in shadow, right? It's kind of hazy, but can you see the cursor? Is that
Yeah.
showing up? There's fence around here, and then up here, I guess we're not seeing it on there, Steve, but there's either railing or fence above here.
Well, there should be a fence around the whole thing that's about what, I don't know, 20 feet high. The whole tennis court's going to be fenced in, right?
Yeah, but it's not 20
Yeah,
feet.
yeah, it's not 20 feet. It's about 10. But yes, the entire perimeter of the tennis courts is fenced.
And so that's just not on this drawing.
Yeah, and
Well, you really can't see it. We're too far away here.
I confess, I grabbed the screenshot from the video, right? So that there's not every detail is shown and rendered in the video because, the purpose of it wasn't to get into all those details, but
Yeah, I think that's what threw Avery off too. She's like, you got to fence in the tennis court, people.
you're right. And I forgot, this is a heavy
Ball.
roof here, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, but, so would you like me to unshare this so we can see each other, or do you want me to?
I need to ask a question on it. So, okay. I have a few questions in there regarding the cement. And I'm referring to this picture, the main building, so do you see where the entrance to the tennis courts is? Like the gate? If you go to the main building, the building we're not renovating, right? Yes,
Along the-
exactly.
Yeah.
Along the bottom there, is that cement that's dark?
That's actually split face CMU. It's a concrete block. It is concrete. Yes.
Okay, because I guess my question about now that we're not going to have brick is do you anticipate that concrete is going to be light? And
Yeah.
if it is there some way to protect it? I know a lot of, as it ages, I'm just thinking a few years out, like to avoid getting stains, or is there something that we can we do to treat it? And then if not, and then also potentially, I think we discussed this in one meeting, give us the ability to maybe put some decorative signage on it so that there's parts of it that I think are quite expansive that you'd be able to put Radnor Pride signs up, et cetera.
And so, yes, Liz, to both questions. So we can, and we have had some discussions about what might be the best way to seal it. That can get maintenance heavy. So we have to weigh the pros and cons of power washing it versus putting a sealer on it. So that's something that we'll continue to look at over the next year so that when we are ready to open, that we know what we want to do with it. It needs to cure before we could put anything on it anyway, and it's not in the contract, so we have some time to figure that out. And then your second question, for sure, we could put, this wall won't be so tall, and I suspect we're going to want to use that as a practice wall.
I'm
But-
not talking, I guess I'm referring to what we
Other walls.
can't see. Yeah. Because, and then my only other question is, yes, and I think we already talked about this. So I just looking to refresh my memory, but did we ever consider it? I mean, right now it seems like an all or nothing with the brick, but was there any discussion about just having like, I'm thinking about the front entranceway, right? We have like the sign that got plowed over that we're rebuilding. It was 2 brick on a slight amount of brick on the side, and then the whole center was concrete. Did we go down that path?
We did, and
There was little accents to touches that
It alters the foundation of that wall to try and do something different. So trying to break it up and do some kind of alternative on that space actually may cost more.
Okay.
yeah, that's well put, Sarah. Even areas that, I think Ken brought it up at one point, if we just did this lower area here. Julie and Pelikanakis did a lot of work breaking out all different sections, but with curves and the way the wall is actually constructed, concrete versus brick, every time you switch, the level of difficulty for the contractor goes up, the costs go up. So we weren't getting any value out of it, no matter which way we did it. And then Steve, I think, again, you mentioned it earlier, but you kind of talked about the vernacular of it and thought, if all the buildings, all the vertical things or stuff connected to the buildings had the brick, and then we stayed consistent with the concrete retaining on any of the ramp systems, that it kind of had a flow architecturally that, and of course the savings. So that's kind of where we ended up.
Right. Yes. And really this view on the right is helpful because it's really only that area there adjacent to the field house where the wall is so tall. That there is by far the tallest portion of this wall. Elsewhere, it varies from almost nothing to 4 or 5 feet. So our thought definitely is to look at the potential at that highest spot of applying something to the wall. Maybe it's a new logo of whatever the ultimate decisions are with respect to that. There could be some opportunity for signage or anything along those lines, but something that's very carefully designed and thought out with a certain amount of sophistication and elegance about what to do with that little bit of blank canvas there where it's so large. But to Bill's point, yes, we have what we feel is a consistent aesthetic in our approach to where the concrete is and where the brick is, that's consistent with the economy that works from the contractor's point of view as well.
And that, I think, is something that we can probably, going forward in steering committee meetings, as we shift more into maybe some discussions about wayfinding, maybe some discussions about what ends up populating the spirit gallery, and signage out here or added decorative things, opportunities for whether it's banners or stainless steel reliefs that go right on, well, not reliefs, but appliques that go right up on there. There could be some really cool things to do. Clearly they're not in the budget right now, but they're also things that could be put on after the fact. They could be fundraising opportunities or booster opportunities. I think it could be a really great opportunity on all of these surfaces. We haven't gotten there yet, but it's something we've discussed, and we know that we have to, put people to task to say, all right, what do we want there?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I could get us back on agenda by unsharing the screen, maybe. Is that
Sounds good. Thank you.
okay?
So I think I didn't hear objections to the change orders, which save us money. So I think we can put those on the board agenda. So item 4.2 is results of the RFP for third-party testing and commissioning services.
Okay, I'm going to share again. Okay, James, you're still with us?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so Fidavia had put out RFPs for third-party testing and commissioning, and to just, again, our professionals might be able to explain. Tell me if I'm missing anything, but our third-party testing is just that. It's an independent engineering inspections testing, things like soil, stone, paving compaction tests. These would be things that we would need at building footers, underground utilities, retaining walls, under our playing fields, our parking areas, things like that. Soil testing, concrete and mortar testing, inspection of rebar. That's something that may be coming up very, very soon. Placement of, I think, concrete, structural steel. When we actually get to start to build on these foundations, we'll have structural steel. So the third party is an engineering group that comes in throughout the project and signs off on all of these things. In addition to township inspectors that come in and land planning inspectors. So these are separate engineers coming in required by the project to do testing, and that explains third party. And I'm going to jump down to commissioning. Separate requests for proposals went out for commissioning. This would be more, well, throughout the project, reviewing plans, but more so when things start to come online. So building management systems, HVAC systems, boilers, hot water heaters, lighting controls and panels, fire alarms, things like that, plumbing systems, pumps, I mentioned water heaters. All those things, as they come online, this is a company that makes sure that they're installed as they were designed, as they need to operate for our operations at the high school, and balancing and testing and all of that is part of commissioning. So again, it's a third party group that comes in. So we got proposals back, and we are highlighting, and Fidavia is recommending the orange highlighted groups. So Atlantic Engineering Labs for third party, and Wright Commissioning for commissioning. These are, and I should note that this is an expense that's built into the soft costs of the project. So this is not an extra or a change order or anything like that. It's just simply another player on our team as we go through the process of construction, and we do have that in the budget. James or Steve, did I miss anything or misinform anything in explaining what these are?
You've got everything covered. That's like you said, Bill. Per the current codes, we have to bring somebody in to carry out both third-party inspections as well as commissioning. We have in the contract that TEB, which is testing and balancing of the ductwork and making sure we've got the correct airflows. That is part of the contract. What we're doing is the commissioning agent is actually going to be reviewing the TEB report to make sure that everything is above board and making sure that we're all in compliance.
Okay. All right, now that's a good correction.
Can I just ask, I know you said these are built into the soft costs. I'm assuming we had a estimated budgeted amount. Is this at or below those budgeted amounts in the soft costs bucket?
That is a good question. I believe it is.
I believe it's under. Steve, are you able to get the document quicker than I can?
We can look into it. I know we talked about it about 3 weeks ago. I don't remember.
No, I think going from memory, I think my estimate was somewhere around $90,000 for this, and we are we are under that slightly.
Great. Okay, thank you.
And the reason this goes in front of the board, even though it's within the project that's been approved, is that these are direct agreements that would be made with the district. So we'll have an agreement with Atlantic Engineering, we'll have another agreement with Wright Commissioning. And so they need to, those agreements would get reviewed by our solicitor within the next week, and then this would go to the board for approval.
There is one thing I do want to comment here, is that under the commissioning is a hard number. That's a hard number for them to do the follow through with the work, because it's I've understood entity of scope of work. The third party testing is actually based off of unit prices, the rates that the contractors, the consultants have provided, and it all depends on how many visits they end up having to provide us. We created a substantial document to evaluate, to the estimate how many visits for each portion of the project there would be. So this number could be going lower, or it could go a little bit higher. So we are going to be tracking it throughout the project and keeping you in the loop of where we stand with everything.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's helpful to understand.
I have a quick question.
Please.
I assume that, you know, that these companies are fully vetted and, you know, do quality work. With that assumption, I mean, why is there such a variance? I know we're talking about, you know, tens of thousands, but why is there such a variance in some of the high and low bids?
That's a very good question. With regards to the third party, that is simply down to rates. So some of the contractors like Hillis Carnes and Kleinfelder, they just had a bigger rate for each of the items. So when you do the multipliers for all the days that they're going to be on site, the number just goes way off target, and that's the reason for that. It's nice and simple, nice and clean. Is that they're all coming off of the same hymn sheet. It's a simple, very detailed rate sheet that they work off of, and that's the only reason why they're a little bit higher. In terms of the commissioning, Site Logic is a little bit further away there in Harrisburg, whereas Wright Commissioning and Ballot Engineering are just literally on your doorstep. So that is one of the reasons why they're a little bit higher. Wick Fisher Wright, we actually reached out to them, and the only thing we gave them an opportunity to revise their bid, but they declined because they didn't think they would ever get anywhere near the other numbers. And that was the fact that they went and took it as being the commissioning as being every single unit in the building was getting reviewed, whereas we actually clarified in our questions and answers portion of the RFP, we clarified that it was going to be a selective. And the other thing was that the portion of this work is going to be done after hours, after school hours. So likes of your lighting systems, etc. That's all going to be done after school's finished. So they put in a very high number for that portion of the work, as well as not doing the sampling versus the full blown, every single unit gets touched.
Okay, and they didn't want to adjust that number, even though their scope was,
They were just outside the numbers.
Okay.
They were when they saw the Wright Commissioning and Ballot was, yes, they were not going to even come near.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I just wondered, are these this third-party testing and this commissioning, are these things that are required by school code? Maybe
They are required by code.
They are.
Yes, this is a code requirement. Now, when I brought this up when we were going to issue the RFPs in the first place, the one thing with the commissioning has actually expanded under the code. Before, under the code for commissioning, all they were looking for was to make sure that the BES system was up to standard and up to the codes that was there. Whereas now they have actually went deeper into the requirements and looking for the lighting system, with the boiler system, with all the a lot more units, etc., like all the lighting systems and the BS system, as well as the boilers, even the electrical side of things as well.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else on 4.2? Okay, so that'll move to the board agenda. Bill, I think we've kind of ventured into this, but 4.3 is the update on value engineered change orders. Other than the brick on the retaining walls, is there anything else you wanted to talk about, the ornamental fencing?
Yes, again, Breslin and Fidavia are working with us right now to review a value engineering change order for a substitution or a different manufacturer for the ornamental fencing. Without getting into, and I know we're pressed for time up against another meeting, but this will give you an idea of one location where there's some ornamental fencing. And I believe ours is actually, this is again a representation, but this fence line along here, it's kind of what runs up against Raider Road behind this building. And then all the way up, you can't see it again in this rendering, but there's fencing up behind here. And then it takes us all the way up to the natatorium. There's a lot of ornamental fencing throughout the project. And Steve, James, do you guys recall the actual number on the ornamental fencing that we're looking at? Somewhere around 20, am I right?
Excuse me, 25,000.
25, okay.
Yep.
Bill, and that's an increase cost?
No, that would be
Decrease.
a decrease.
Mhm.
And essentially, for people who are trying to visualize, this would be a replacement of where we have all the chain link fencing along Raider Road. That would be
Yeah,
replaced with
that gives
ornamental
you-
fencing.
That gives us a pretty good sense of where it would be located. We have it in other places, again, around the maintenance yard and down in what will be the new the accessible parking lot by the natatorium. It shows up in several places, even over on the loop side of the project. We have ornamental fencing over there as well. So there's quite a bit of it throughout the project. It would be defining the perimeter of the athletic fields and the proposed other alternate manufacturer. It's the same height. We're checking the specifications on the paint finish, same material, same style. Very, very little difference. I think right now there's a privacy screen that would go by our maintenance yard. And I think between the two manufacturers, that's slightly different. And we're just looking at those details right now. But other than that, it seems to be apples to apples, and we're confirming that. And we think that would be another great value to take.
So Bill, is this similar to the railings in that it's somewhat of a savings because we're finding a more local manufacturer, so we're saving on transportation costs, or it's actually just,
That's a great
it's hard for us to believe there are decreases in the cost of materials these days, given the state of the supply chain?
No, that's a great question. So I don't know if the ornamental fence, I don't think it's the exact same scenario. I think it's just their manufacturing costs are different. Steve or James, do you know enough about the two companies to know, if they're doing something different?
Yeah, I think it is, I describe it as a Ford Chevy conversation just between two very similar manufacturers. I can't speak to why. The volatility of materials right now and the labor situation could very well create that kind of variance where somebody has has a backlog and somebody else doesn't. And so it could be the increases that are generating this spread. And for whatever reason, when the contractor, so we had a basis of design specification that include three different manufacturers. There's obviously others out there. So the contractor found one of them, submits the information to us, which then we check against the spec to make sure that it truly is a Ford Chevy and not a Ford Yugo or something like that. And so that's the process we're going through. It's looking good. By the time this gets in front of the board with an actual credit change order, we would have that process complete.
Okay. And if it's less than 30, it can go through just this committee, but certainly if the board is if it's more expedient to send it through the board, I don't think anyone here would object.
I think that would be the cleanest way if we can, because then we still need to report it to the board. So
Right.
if it all lines up and we have all the information, we may change that to, an action item by the time we get in front of the board.
I just have a question for clarification. Isn't this the same thing that we were talking about before with the 95,000 savings, or is this using that same fence in a different location?
That's a great question, Nancy. We're talking about ornamental fencing now, and we were talking about guardrails previously. See if I can bring that back up. So these would be railings that, we're going to have up on the second level of the field house that we'll have as we come down the ramps.
Right.
Just guardrails, and the fencing would be more
like as shown in the other image. Okay.
Correct.
So you found an alternative manufacturer for both of those types, and you just haven't quantified the savings for the fence along the road.
Yeah, I think that one simply had to do, we were still waiting on that privacy fence area at the, Steve, is that correct? I think that was the only thing that might change the number a little bit, is what we do with the
Right.
privacy fence along the maintenance yard. Once we get
Okay.
that clarified, we'll have that solid number. So if it's 25 turns into 22 or 27, we'll know that shortly.
Okay. Maybe make that clearer. I couldn't follow. I apologize. I was very confused with the other fencing discussion. Okay.
No, good point. It is confusing.
So this is eventually going to be another change order.
Yes, and ideally it'll be done in time for the full board meeting this month so
Got
that
it.
we can approve all three and they would all be reductions.
Got it.
Correct. And then we did talk, the only other thing to report back was that we did talk about, and we jumped into this a little bit. Some of the board showed some interest and steering as well as, could we retain this brick here? And what we were coming back with was that to put it back into the project, we were going to be looking at another $320,000. Did not think that was worth putting back in. And so we're not recommending that. So I just wanted to report that back.
Okay.
All right.
So without any objections, we'll suggest that Mr. Dolan, once he has final numbers, if he can get it on this month's board agenda, if that makes sense. So item 4.4 is the update on vaccination clinics, everybody's favorite topic.
All right. Allison, did Vaughn Bryan jump on? He was considering jumping on here, but he was juggling a lot of stuff tonight. If he didn't, I'll take it. So quick update, and I know we have another meeting in about 5 minutes. Want to report that on April 23rd, 24th, and 25th, we did our first shots of vaccination clinics here at Radnor High School. And it was in two different groupings, two different partnerships. The first one on Friday the 23rd was for 16-year and up. We had over 1,000 students from Radnor, Marple, Newtown, Haverford. We had volunteers from all of those districts come to our high school. We all worked as a team. It was really a good vibe there. And we were partnered up with Springfield Pharmacy on that effort. On the next day, Saturday, and then Sunday, we were partnered up with Penn Med and Delaware County Emergency Services. And we were then doing eligible adults in our surrounding areas. Over 3,000 folks came for their vaccination first shot, and we had over 200 volunteers throughout that weekend. So that was a great success. The weather cooperated, and as you can see, Gritty showed up. If you ask Vaughn, Gritty got in the way of a smooth operation, but everybody else was excited to have him there, and that was fun. And then I'm going to jump to the second shot, which is coming up this weekend. So in follow up to that, the same groups will be visiting us again this Friday with the students 16 and up, and then on Saturday and Sunday, those 3,000 plus adults from our community will be back here. We're still filling in volunteer spots for the weekend. So if you're interested, you can check our website or get in touch with operations or communications departments here, and we'll get you linked into volunteer slots. And then we are considering vaccinations for 12 and 15 from 12 up to 15-year-olds students. That is, sort of late breaking news. It hasn't been confirmed. It's just something that we're watching as vaccines are being tested and approved for that age group. And we're also quizzing or polling our community to see if the interest is there. It's looking like the interest is there. And then how could we facilitate that? So more to come on that. And that's the vaccine updates. Unless there are any questions, I just wanted to share that good news with everyone.
Mr. Dolan, and you may not know the answer to this, but because I know we'll get these questions, I've already got from some people. I know oftentimes when a clinic is being run and it's the second set of doses, there really aren't extras. But do we expect that there may be any extras that people should be waiting for a call from the district like there was last time, and that there might be any available either Friday night or Saturday and Sunday with the separate provider?
Now, great question. I think there would be less available, but I don't want to guarantee, but I am almost certain that there will be some available. So yes, I think it would be great to be on that waiting list and be available. And there's a very good chance that you could get your shot if you're not already signed up.
And I have a follow-up question to that too. And you may not be able to answer this, but you did consider the comment about 12 to 15-year-olds, given the recent news. Is there any potential for allowing 12 to 15-year-olds to get a shot this weekend if there are extras?
That is a great question. That I don't know. I hadn't even thought of that question, but
I've been asked the question already, which is
I assumed that was what that's what I was thinking of.
I think this would be what I was thinking of is another sort of another day specific to that. But you bring up a great point, and it may be considered. I'm reporting back, but there's a much bigger team than me behind this. So that let me find out. Let me try to find out tomorrow, see where we're at, because it really is kind of late breaking news, and I know we're working on it. There may be an answer to that. I don't know it right now.
Great. Is there any new business? Okay, seeing none. Ms. Gengel, is there any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, we have another meeting in 1 to 2 minutes, depending on the clock I look at. So you all get a very short break. Our next meeting of the Facilities Committee, I believe, will still be virtual from what the agendas say, and it is currently scheduled for June 22nd at 6:30 p.m. Thank you all for your time this evening, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah.